Hello and welcome. The day has finally come. My Lisa Eldridge order arrived and I'm going to be showing you all 4 new shades of the Velvet lipsticks, all 3 new shades of the glosses. I have the matching liners for each of the new Velvet shades. I have some of the other liners too, and I want to do some comparisons so you can see all the sort of nude toned liners against one another. I have comparisons for all the lipsticks and the glosses as well. And of course, I'm going to lip swatch everything. And I'm going to be trying out the new Seamless Skin foundation for the first time, showing you how I shade matched, which shade I chose, and how I applied it. So if you'd like to see all of that, just keep on watching. So starting with the foundation, I'm going to show you some footage of me swatching 5 of the shades, the 5 lightest shades, or the first 5 shades on my face. From those 5 shades, I ended up choosing shade 1. I thought shade 1 maybe would be a little bit too light for me, but when I did the face swatches, it turned out to definitely be the best match to match my face and my body together, and then I put it all over my face. So I used shade 1, which is described as extra light or extra fair, with neutral undertones. I found that shade 2 looked a little bit too pinky. It's one with cool undertones, and the rest of the shades all just look too deep and kind of orangey on me. So I figured that shade 1 was the perfect match for me. I built it up first in 1 layer. I used my Westman Atelier foundation brush for the first layer because in Lisa's video detailing how to choose your foundation shade and how to apply it and so on, she mentioned that most makeup artists that she had sent it to preferred it with a kind of flat paddle brush. So I used my Westman Atelier foundation brush because it's that type of a brush. I didn't really enjoy it that way. I don't like that brush anyway, so it's probably more to do with the brush rather than the method or the shape of the brush itself. For my second layer, building it up, I went ahead and used my standard favorite foundation brush, which is the Sonia G Jumbo Base, and that worked beautifully to blend it out. So I think I'm going to be able to use that brush, which I use for most of my foundations, with the Lisa Eldridge foundation as well, which is great. It blended it out really easily, really quickly, and I was really happy to see how beautifully it built on top of itself. So 1 layer was quite sheer, which is great because if you want a sheer coverage, you can definitely get it from this foundation. And then the second layer really built up the coverage, but allowed the skin to maintain a very fresh and seamless and skin-like look, even with 2 layers of foundation on it. And then I just used the foundation as a concealer as well. So I just built it up strategically in certain areas, under my eyes, around my nose, and blended it out with actually the Real Technique setting brush, which is a smaller, slightly fluffy brush that I like to use to blend out concealer, and that worked great as well. After I had applied the foundation, I went and did the rest of my complexion. So I applied the Elevated Glow highlighter in the shade Crystal Nebula as a highlighter. And I have to say, for the fairest foundation shade, Crystal Nebula is definitely too deep and too warm. I could visibly see it on my face that it was looking very yellow and too deep as a highlighter, really. So I really hope that Lisa comes out with the new lighter shade of the Elevated Glow soon, because I wouldn't wear Crystal Nebula with this foundation shade personally. It's not as obvious now because I have the blush and bronzer on and everything's kind of blended in. But for a true highlighter, I would need something a bit lighter than Crystal Nebula. Then I used the Solar Flare highlighter, which is the 3rd shade of the 4 highlighter shades, and I used that as my bronzer today. And then I used Pink Soap for blush. I haven't set anything down, no powder, no finishing powder. It's meant to be a self-setting foundation, so I want to see how it works self-setting. I imagine that I'll probably keep using my Becca finishing veil because I've just been using that as a setting and finishing powder a lot lately, and I really enjoy it. But I just wanted to see how the foundation would do on its own first. And the foundation really does look very seamless, and it just looks like skin. I can't detect any visible like pigment particles or any appearance of foundation. It just looks extremely natural, and I think that shade 1 is a really good shade match for me. Okay, and now let's get into the lips. I'm going to start with the glosses and then move into the velvets. So the first gloss that I'm going to use is the Petal Gloss. Here's one layer of the Petal Gloss. And here is 2 layers built up of the Petal Gloss. It's a beautiful shade. For me, it's a My Lips But Better shade. It's kind of like a My Lips But Fresher. It's a really fresh, warm pink, not too deep, not too light, just brings a little bit of life to the face, and I think a perfect everyday color. Next up is the Dragon Gloss. Here's one layer of the Dragon Gloss. And here's the Dragon Gloss built up in 2 layers. It's a beautiful color. I think it's a good representation of the Velvet Dragon shade, which came out in the lipstick formula last year. I think it's just a sheerer, slightly more wearable version of that color, of course, in gloss form. And last but not least for the glosses is the Cinnabar Gloss. Here's one layer of the Cinnabar Gloss. And here are 2 layers built up of the Cinnabar Gloss. I love this color. I especially loved it, I think, just in the 1 layer. I really liked that sheer level of coverage that I was getting. And this beautiful color is easier to wear than I thought it would be. I'm gonna be so curious to try it in the Velvet formula because I know that's obviously going to be a more intense version of the color. But as a gloss, I really love this, and I actually liked it more than I expected to. I knew it would be beautiful, but I think it has a really special quality to it with that balance of kind of brown, but there's some cool tones in to balance the orange there, and it's just a beautiful shade. So that's the Cinnabar Gloss. Now for the part I'm most excited about, the new shades of True Velvet lipsticks. I'm going to start with Velvet Intrigue. It looks very promising. I was most interested in this Velvet Intrigue shade because I think when a light nude shade like this works, it really works, and it can do something kind of magical, and I just love that type of a shade. So I'm very curious to see if this will work on me. So let's find out. So here's just 1 layer of Velvet Intrigue. Here is Velvet Intrigue built up to its full opacity. I'm very happy with this shade. This is exactly what I was hoping for, and I'm very curious to compare it to Kitten Mischief because I think it's a similar tone. I can see the pink and the peach and the brown all mixed in there in perfect harmony. And now I want to try the Intrigue Liner with this. And here's Velvet Intrigue with the Intrigue Liner. Beautiful. I'm thrilled with this shade. I almost don't want to take it off, but I need to try the other shades. So next I'm going to move on to Velvet Petal. I forgot to read out the description for Velvet Intrigue, so I'm just going to do that now. She says, with a softness of hue, this delicately warm light peach rose beige gives a whisper light effect. If Velvet Fawn with its cool beige pink attitude is inspired by the 1990s, then this shade is inspired by the 1960s, albeit with a modern and wearable update, the lightest of all the True Velvet shades. And I'm so happy to have a shade that's lighter than Velvet Fawn and a little bit warmer. For me, that's perfect, and I'm really happy with that shade. So now let's move on to Velvet Petal. Here's Velvet Petal. This is at its full opacity. I'll blot it down in a moment so you can see what it would look like more sheer, but this is when it's fully built up. This is a stunning color. I think this brings so much life to the face. It feels sort of similar to Velvet Intrigue, but obviously deeper, and it just is a little bit more vibrant. It has a bit more of a punch to it. the beautiful warm pink shade. And Lisa says, think of the soothing song of the spring peony in full bloom. This perfectly formed, light warm pink borrows all the best from nature's palette in a Parisian florist's window. Just shy of a cotton candy snapdragon, it flutters more on the side of a perfectly sophisticated and chic essential. And I love flowers. If I could be surrounded by flowers all the time, I would be so happy. So it's really nice to have a velvet petal that's inspired by flowers, and I loved how she talked about specific flowers, the snapdragon, and I think she mentioned geraniums in another description of the shade as well. And I just think this is a perfect mid-tone warm pink, beautifully balanced and really life-giving to the face, and I think this would be stunning as a blush as well. And here's Velvet Petal, just blotted down so it looks more like a stain. Still beautiful, just a less intense version of the color. And now I've built it up again because I want to pair it with the Petal Liner. So I'm going to put that on and we'll see how it all looks together. And here's Velvet Petal with the Petal Liner. Okay, next up is Velvet Blush Lightly. And Lisa created this shade apparently at the request of a lot of her fans who liked Velvet Blush but found it a little bit too deep and intense. So this was kind of created for those of us with fair skin who want the tone of Velvet Blush, but just in a little bit of a less intense version. Okay, so here's a very light layer of Velvet Blush Lightly. And here's Velvet Blush Lightly built up all the way. Another stunning color, and I am really happy with this because I do love Velvet Blush, but it's quite an intense color on me, and this feels a lot more wearable and kind of everyday friendly to me. So I'm really happy with this shade, and it has beautiful undertones. It has more of a balance of cool and warm than Velvet Petal. Velvet Petal was definitely a warm color to me. This one is a little bit more balanced, but it's not as cool, say, as Velvet Beauty, which is a very, very blue-based pink. So I'm going to be really curious to compare all these pinks and sort of mid-tone berries against one another to see how they differ, but this is Velvet Blush Lightly and I love it. Lisa describes Velvet Blush Lightly and she says, as the name suggests, this is a softer and less intense version of the best-selling Velvet Blush as requested by you. A playful, wearable, medium muted berry tone, which evokes a just-bitten lip flushed with color. As delightfully jejune as the lips in a Fragonard or Boucher artwork, this is Rococo for the lips with a modern twist. This one will set hearts racing. And it's so funny that she said it sets hearts racing because I was watching my friend Zach Dooley's video on what he picked up from this round, and he bought Velvet Blush Lightly. That was one of the shades he got, and when he put it on his lips, my heart really did skip a beat. It was so beautiful on him. I'm gonna link his video below so you can see everything he got, and he did a beautiful job of lip swatching everything and discussing the tones, so definitely check out Zach's video. You should also check out Beauty Has Been. They've done actually a couple of videos already on this new collection. They've done a video on all the glosses that they have, so some from this new launch and some that they had previously, and they've got a number of shades from this new launch as well. So I'm going to just link their channel so you can check them out as well. And now I want to pair the Blush Lightly liner with Velvet Blush Lightly. And here's the Blush Lightly liner with Velvet Blush Lightly. And now for the shade that everyone was so excited about, Velvet Cinnabar. Okay, here's a very light layer of Velvet Cinnabar. And to me, it has a very similar effect to the Cinnabar Gloss, which makes sense. But let's see how this looks built up. Here's Velvet Cinnabar built up all the way. Such a stunning color. It's unlike anything else that I have. I will compare it to Velvet Dragon, but it's definitely deeper and more brown, and I just love how this looks. I've loved how it looks on everyone that I've seen try it, and I think it's truly a unique shade. I think Lisa's done something very special with this one. So about Velvet Cinnabar, Lisa says, inspired by the dense, poisonous red mineral which has been used as a precious resource around the world since at least the 10th millennium BC. During ancient rituals and rites of passage, it came to denote blood, victory, success, and even immortality. In its various forms, including vermilion, it has been used as an artist's pigment and can be seen in the frescoes of ancient Rome. It was also used extensively as a cosmetic, most famously by Queen Elizabeth I, to create an intensely dramatic and powerful effect on the lips and cheeks. Velvet Cinnabar is the deepest, richest, most powerful burnt ochre warm brown red imaginable. And she's nailed it. And I'm really surprised how it makes the teeth look whiter, I think, which I wouldn't expect from a really warm, orangey, yellowy shade like this. But I think it's very flattering to the skin and to the teeth as well. And you can tell how excited Lisa is about this color, and I'm really excited about it too. I think it's stunning. I'm gonna try now the Cinnabar Liner with this lipstick. And here's the Cinnabar Liner with the Cinnabar lipstick. I think these pair so well together. The liner has a little touch more depth to it that just really creates a beautiful, crisp, and defined look to the lips and really complements the lipstick shade itself. And I think what's so special about this shade, or one of the things that is so special about it, is that it somehow manages to balance between being very intense but also muted in a way. And I don't know how Lisa does that, but she just does that with so many of her shades. It's really amazing, that balance between muted and vibrant at the same time. And I think that's one of the things that really does make Lisa's lipsticks unique and so special. All right, I'm gonna leave Velvet Cinnabar on, and then I'm gonna do some comparisons. So starting with the glosses, here are all the pinkish glosses together. This is Songbird, this is Charm, this here is the new Petal Gloss, and this is the Beauty Gloss. So you can see all these different variations of pink. They're all very different to me. Songbird is quite warm and a real putty pink color as it's described. Charm is very youthful, almost bubblegummy type pink. And then we have Petal, which is a more warm, mid-toned pink. And then Beauty, I think you can really see here. I'm just gonna spread it out a little bit so you can really see the undertones. It's deeper than Petal, I think, and definitely so much more blue. So again, we have Songbird, Charm, Petal, and Beauty. Now for the Cinnabar and Dragon glosses, I don't really have other glosses to compare those to because these are unique colors, but I just wanted to compare them to each other. So this one's Dragon and this one's Cinnabar. And you can really see here how Dragon, although Dragon is more muted than some of the other shades, like it's more muted than Velvet Morning, for example, but you can see how Cinnabar is even more toned down in a sense, although it's still obviously so impactful, but I can see much more brown in the Cinnabar shade, and you can just really see the differences in these tones here. So again, this is the Dragon Gloss and this is the Cinnabar Gloss. All right, here is Velvet Intrigue compared to Kitten Mischief. And I do think they're pretty similar tones. I'd say they have a similar depth. I think that Intrigue is coming off a little bit deeper than Kitten Mischief, but I think that's more due to the texture rather than the actual color. Because it's a matte velvet, it's very opaque and it's not reflecting light like Kitten Mischief is, which is a lucent formula. But I do think the shades are quite similar. I think that Kitten Mischief is maybe a touch more pink, but very, very similar shades, and I'm so, so happy about this. I've been waiting for Lisa to come out with a velvet like this, and this is just perfection. So I'm so happy with it. So again, this is Velvet Intrigue, and this is Kitten Mischief. I forgot I also wanted to compare Velvet Fawn to Velvet Intrigue. So here's Velvet Fawn and here's Velvet Intrigue. and I can see that Velvet Intrigue is a touch lighter than Velvet Fawn, and you can really see when they're compared here how much cooler Velvet Fawn is than Velvet Intrigue, which for me is great because I find Fawn just a little bit too cool tone for me to wear as kind of like an everyday type of color, whereas Intrigue has just enough of that warmth and peachy pink to it that it's perfect. So Velvet Fawn and Velvet Intrigue. All right, so here I have comparisons for both Velvet Petal and Velvet Blush Lightly. This here is Velvet Muse, this is Velvet Petal, Velvet Beauty, Velvet Blush Lightly, and Velvet Blush. So I really wanted to look at all of these together because I think they're in sort of similar range in terms of their depth, but all variations in tone. When I saw Velvet Petal, I thought it kind of looked like somewhere in between Velvet Beauty and Velvet Muse, because it has more warmth than both of those colors and definitely a lot more pink than Velvet Muse, but also at the same time a lot less brown than Velvet Muse and a lot less blue than Velvet Beauty. So I really wanted to see how those would all compare to each other, and I think just looking at them you can really see those distinct differences in the undertones of these three shades. And then I wanted to show Velvet Blush Lightly with these as well, because you can see when you look at it next to both Velvet Beauty and Velvet Petal that it's kind of somewhere in between those two shades in a sense, because it's a more neutral and balanced tone than either one of them, I would say, because Petal is quite warm, Beauty is quite cool, and I can see both cool and warm in Blush Lightly. And then when you compare Blush Lightly to Blush, you can see they have the same undertones, but one is just lighter and a little bit less intense than the other. So again, this is Velvet Muse, Velvet Petal, Velvet Beauty, Velvet Blush Lightly, and Velvet Blush. And lastly, for the velvet comparisons, I wanted to compare Velvet Cinnabar, which is right here, to Velvet Dragon and Velvet Decade. I kind of think that Velvet Cinnabar is almost like if you combine Velvet Decade with Velvet Cinnabar, because it has a lot of that brown that Velvet Decade has as well, but obviously it's also got that orangey sort of ochre tone that Velvet Dragon has. So again, Velvet Dragon, Velvet Cinnabar, and Velvet Decade. I also got a number of the liners, so I just wanted to show you the four kind of nude tones of the liners all compared. So this one is the Intrigue Liner. This is the Fawn Liner, this is the Muse Liner, and this is the Affair Liner. So it's really interesting to see them all lined up next to each other again, so you can really see the differences in tones. I'm really interested in the difference here between Muse and Affair liners. You can see how very warm Affair is compared to Muse, which is a much more muted down tone. And then comparing Intrigue to Fawn, again we have that sort of warm cool difference. Intrigue is a lot warmer, whereas Fawn is a lot cooler. And I think each of these shades is going to be very useful for me because they're going to help to alter different colors. If I want to warm up a lighter color, I'd use Intrigue. If I want to warm up a slightly deeper color, I'd use Affair. And similarly for a slightly cooler, sort of deeper mid-tone color, I could use Muse. And for a little bit of a cooler, lighter tone, Fawn is going to be perfect. So I'm very curious to actually play with these and use them over the coming weeks and find out which one I end up using the most, because that seems to be the way it goes with me in lip liners. I'll kind of zero in on one and really find that that's the one that I find most useful and that I'm drawn to the most. So it'll be interesting to just kind of see how that plays out. Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to show you in this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know if you have any questions or comments below. I'd love to see those. And if you'd like to see more from me and you haven't subscribed to my channel already, I'd really love for you to do so. Thanks so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.